Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:07. It's O'Connor and Company here on Thursday morning, 28th day of August. Thanks for joining us here. It's a busy one, and we got a lot to unpack, including the events yesterday in Minnesota and the way the media is covering it. It's 7:35. James Gagliano will join us. He's a retired FBI agent. 8:05 will be KT McFarland, latest on Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and China, and all the things. 8:35, Chuck Thies, D.C. political analyst, commenting on Mayor Muriel Bowser saying, yeah, maybe having more cops in D.C. isn't a bad thing after all. That's all coming up. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel this morning. She's the proprietor of the Mom Wars podcast and Substack. Good morning, Bethany.
Good morning, Larry. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. It's always depressing the day after a mass shooting and children, and it's just horrific, and it's awful, and it breaks your heart, and you got to cover it because you're in the news business, and then you see how other people in the news business choose to cover it, and it becomes maddening. Mm-hmm. You know, you ask me how I am, that's how I am.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's a big deal. Also, with regard to our children, Fairfax County School Board will be meeting tonight. That's always a bit of a circus, and it would be fun to laugh at if it weren't our Northern Virginia children who are in the crosshairs with ideologically with the people who are trying to indoctrinate and really do everything but educate our children. Joining us right now is Victoria Cobb. She's the president of the Family Foundation of Virginia, and she wants to give us a bit of a preview. Good morning, Victoria. Always great to talk with you.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
At this point, I don't even know why the school board has public meetings because it's so slanted and loaded up with people who just don't even listen to the parents anymore. But what is on the agenda tonight, and what can parents do about it?
Well, you know, we are trying to make our voices heard with regard to this terrible situation where Fairfax County appears to have a pattern, multiple incidences of taking young girls from the school to an abortion facility without their parents. So there's going to be a public comment period. And so we're encouraging folks to come out. We'd really like to see a large crowd there just to make sure the board understands how serious this is and that people are paying attention. Sometimes they need to feel the presence of the folks that they are supposed to be there to do great policy for. They need to see the parents. And so we're encouraging folks to come out.
Yeah, and I'll let Bethany in here in a second, but they haven't actually, as a body, said anything about this, have they?
Not that we have seen. There has not been, a formal statement put out that in any way seems to take some culpability for what has gone on. It seems to be ready to address and ensure that we're going to make sure this never happens again. So, yeah, I think there's work to be done, and I think parents are required to remind them what kind of work needs to be done because this is tragic. I mean, this cannot continue.
So when you're sort of preparing to have parents come, have you sort of filled up the speaking slots? Because that's what we do in Montgomery County. We make sure that as soon as those speaking spots are available, they're all filled up with parents who are like-minded. Have you all done the same out in Virginia?
Yes, and they are, very intentionally trying to make sure that parents are putting forward a really strong, consistent message. We want the board to be very clear that they need to act. They need to act immediately to fix this. And of course, they can never fix what has already occurred. I mean, these are truly tragic. I mean, one of these situations, a girl was 5 months pregnant, told she had no other choice. I mean, imagine handling that without involving a parent. These kids can't get aspirin at school without, parent involvement, but this happens. And so we really think it's critical. And there'll be some folks heading up some of the pro-life organizations that will be there involved and helpful to make sure that message gets forward. So we are, at this point, it's hard to say. They've reopened the speaking slots and then closed them. So we don't expect it's a very, very bizarre process, but we don't expect there'll necessarily be spots left, but we would like physical bodies holding signs, reminding the board. And
not any racist signs, right? Not like...
Well, signs have certainly been in the news lately. My goodness.
Maybe check your signs with your friends next to you.
We don't play that game.
How can...
I know that... I know that our signs will say that we don't co-parent with the government.
There you go. There you
go. A little reminder.
How can parents? So what I love about this parent-led movement is that it is very organic. How can parents who are in Fairfax keep up to date with knowing their talking points and what a lot of people don't know how to testify in front of these things. It's very scary. It's very intimidating. Is there a way that parents can sort of link up with folks beforehand?
Well, yes, I would come a little bit early. There's going to be a little bit of a press conference from some folks who will be speaking about this, so they'll be able to hear some talking points there. People really need to be on our email alerts because that is sort of where Fairfax folks have been really encouraged on exactly, what's going on. And they can just do that on our website at familyfoundation.org. And then we have a Speak Up Fairfax group. So that is our local grassroots group for exactly these moments where people are local and they're ready to engage, and we kind of help that group engage collectively because we are stronger when we stand together, when we're not individualized voices, when we're sort of one coherent message. So that's another thing that folks can do.
That's great. And again, this story continues to sort of evolve, and it certainly appears as though if it isn't a outright blatant printed, spoken, acknowledged policy of Fairfax County high schools, it seems to be at least some sort of tacit understanding that if an underage girl reveals that they are expecting, then the school appears to facilitate termination of that pregnancy and actively conceal it from that minor child's parents. This is a medical procedure, a surgical procedure in some cases, and the parents have no clue about it. That's basically based on everything that I've studied here. Fairfax County High School will say, "Oh, well, we have a policy that every effort should be made," but there's no way to quantify that. What does that even mean? Every effort should be made.
That's exactly right, and it's clear that every effort isn't made because if you facilitate and pay for and take the child to an abortion facility, those are all opportunities for the parent to step in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even if the child wanted to do it without her parent, first of all, she's going to violate the law. So you have to have an abortion provider willing to violate the law. So that's the frustrating part there. But also, if they did, they'd have to pay for it. They'd have to get there. All of those things open the conversation up. The school should initially initiate the conversation. But every time they took a step to help this girl, that's a place where the parent would normally need to step in order to make this what that girl chose to do. But the fact that the school policy does not line up with the law, if the law says you need parental consent for abortion, the school policy ought to be, I must immediately initiate contact with the parent.
It would only be responsible here for us to now play the statement that candidate for governor Abigail Spanberger has put forth about this controversial issue that so many people have been talking about. Can we hear what Abigail Spanberger said? Oh, yeah, that's right. She hasn't said anything about it. We don't have that statement. It doesn't exist. Victoria Cobb, we very much admire your advocacy on this issue. We're glad you're going to be there. Is your name on the list, or did you get in? You're going to be speaking?
We actually have Nancy Linton from our team, who is a phenomenal Fairfax resident and been a parent in the Fairfax system and a counselor. So we felt like she's the best voice for our organization today.
Cannot wait. Be strong. It'll be a hostile environment, but you've got God on your side. Victoria Cobb, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
She is the president of the Family Foundation of Virginia, and of course we'll have coverage of tonight's school board meeting on O'Connor and Company tomorrow. It's 7:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news, live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Bethany Mandel, let's check in with the Department of Transportation, shall we?
I can't wait. But first, I just want to tell our listeners that you were committing HR violations in the commercial break, and that's why you sounded like you were laughing.
I have no idea what you're talking about. You know what? Hey, what happens?
What happens during the commercial break does not stay in the commercial break. When Bethany
There's a
Mandel
reason why there are things that are said on air versus off air, and you don't officially work here, so it's not.
I was just thinking that's why you have me come in because there's no. But do you know who does work here in Washington D.C. and I'm so happy about it? Look at this segue, Sean Duffy.
Sean Duffy, our Secretary of Treasury. Boy, you talk about upgrades from the Biden administration to this.
Right?
Buttigieg to Duffy, and a huge announcement made yesterday with regard to a pretty important hub of transportation here in the District of Columbia, Union Station. Take a listen to the announcement yesterday.
Today we're announcing that we're going to take Union Station back under DOT control. Not a power play, we've always had it, but we think that we can manage the property better, bring in more tenants, bring in more revenue, and that revenue is going to allow us to make investments in this beautiful building. It needs investments. It's been, I think, neglected for decades, and it's showing its age. And again, we want to make this place beautiful and the premier train station, not just in America, but the premier train station in the world. And that takes money. And again, it's this reform that's going to help us make that happen.
Couple things. So refreshing to hear a cabinet secretary talk about how, yes, this place needs money and our department needs money. And instead of raising your taxes or begging Congress for it, we're going to figure out ways to have streams of income coming in through the operation of Union Station. Thank you, number one. Number two, the fact that he says that it's showing its age and it needs repairs and it's been neglected. It just had a huge earthquake restoration. It took 10 years. It went over budget. Mm-hmm. And if there are still structural problems, we should be outraged that all that time and money was wasted. However, it does look amazing right now compared to what it looked like literally 3 weeks ago because of the cleanup and because of the restoration from the neglect during the homeless crisis, the criminal vagrants, all of the things that were allowed to happen in that train station. And if the federal government taking control of this property is a way to maintain that beauty, that's great. Bethany, I worry that a lousy administration will actually run it into the ground again.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a valid fear. I think that, Duffy's pronouncements that, we're gonna get better infrastructure, all of those things. But the real thing that's going to save Union Station is the fact that they're getting all the homeless and crime out of there. I go through Union Station all the time. That's our sort of our gateway when we come in from Maryland into the city. And foot traffic in the building is non-existent. There's no stores there because it's not a nice place that you want to stroll around. It's a place you want to get in and out of as fast as humanly possible.
That's right. That's right. In any major city where you've got a big transportation hub like the train station and the metro all converges there, Amtrak, MARC, the Virginia trains, it usually that becomes a hub of economic activity because everyone's coming in and going out. You buy your bagels, you buy your coffees, you buy your lunch. You meet people at the train station. Oh, let's have lunch at the train station before I hop on the train. Nobody does that in this town.
No.
Because they're terrified to be there, and it's been a cesspool. You can't take your kids into the bathrooms there because it's dangerous. This is a huge – and all of that generates income, by the way, that then ends up going to pay for the facility. That's what the free market's all about, and that's how this administration approaches it. Here's the problem. What happens when the federal government takes control of Union Station and then President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now in charge, and her transportation secretary, Ilhan Omar?
Oh, God. So I think you've just made the case for why we need Emperor Trump forevermore.
Well, perhaps.
I don't know.
We'll see. By the way, also yesterday he was in quickly, you tell your anecdote. I'll tell mine. I just took the train this past weekend. I had to take the train up to Connecticut. And we purposely got the Amtrak at BWI instead of going to Union Station. Oh. We went out of our way to avoid Union Station, even though it would have been more convenient based on what we were doing that day.
I've made this joke before on air, but it's such a good joke that I'll make it again. The only downside of all of this is where are my children going to learn about how police can arrest a naked homeless person in a way that they don't touch any private parts without Union Station being the way that it was.
Well, you can always take your kids on a field trip to Los Angeles, California.
Or the O'Connor house.
Oh, hey, I never get arrested. Also announced yesterday was the new generation Acela train.
I'm so excited about this one.
All members of the media and elected officials here in D.C. will be thrilled with. No, the Acela is actually a very civilized way to travel.
Yes, if it actually works, it's a fast way to get to New York and Boston.
Yep, and it's apparently the next generation Acela is going to be much faster, much quieter, much more efficient.
Here's the problem: they're going to have to go through places like New Jersey and New York, which
Well,
don't keep things running great.
Okay, just so you know, this train can travel at speeds of 160 miles an hour, and that's exactly how fast you want to go through New Jersey.
Precisely right.
723.
Making sense of your world.
Greatly appreciated.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
I love listening to you.
Making sense of the news.
All right, coming up, we continue our examination of the shooting in Minnesota. We'll speak with James Gagliano, retired FBI special agent. Keep it here.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:37 here this Thursday morning. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. Glad to be your sidekick here on your morning commute. Coming up at 8:05, KT McFarland will be here, and at 8:35, Chuck Thies. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel. Good morning, Bethany. Thanks for being here on a Thursday.
And I'm glad to be the sidekick to your sidekick.
I appreciate that. There's a whole lot of sides getting kicked. That sounds violent. Joining us right now is retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent and now on the Board of Directors of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. He is James Gagliano. Thanks for joining us. Always good to talk with you, except for the circumstances, sadly. But thank you for bringing your expertise to our conversation.
Larry and Bethany, thanks for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
So we saw the events transpire yesterday in Minneapolis, and at a shooting incident like this, when local law enforcement obviously are the first responders, at what point does the FBI get involved? We saw Director Kash Patel make an announcement pretty early on that FBI would be directly involved with the investigation too. What is it about this crime that immediately triggers FBI involvement?
Sure, that's a great question, Larry. So there is no true trigger if it's simply a case of murder. Now, there are certain applications where the FBI is automatically brought in, and that basically dates back to 1998 and the Presidential Decision Directive 62 under the Clinton administration that basically states that you assume terrorism until proven otherwise, and you work backwards from that. Now, I know the FBI director got out in front of this yesterday and said early on this was a case of domestic terrorism, and obviously there was the application of hate crimes as well. But typically speaking, in mass shootings, the FBI doesn't have overt authority unless it's a smaller department, a smaller jurisdiction, and the locals of the state reaches out and asks for assistance.
So in this case, because it appears that these children were targeted because of their religious faith, that's why it immediately became an act of terror?
Well, so let's look at the narrow description or definition of what terrorism is. So it's violence or intimidation in pursuit of political, ideological, religious, or social justice objectives. And in this case, I mean, from the outset, you can determine that that's what this was.
So on one of our last segments, we had a great conversation with Rob O'Donnell, who talked about how law enforcement had basically leaked materials to him before it got disappeared and evaporated. And something that I love that LELDF, right? That's how there's not a tag. So I'm very familiar with the incredible work that you guys do, sort of making sure that law enforcement are supported. As they have, if anything has happened in the line of duty, that law enforcement get our support. I think that's incredibly important. And I saw and I'm glad that we're talking, a lot of what y'all do in the actions of the law enforcement that leaked that material to Rob O'Donnell, because they're making sure that the investigation happens the way that it's supposed to, unlike what happened in Covenant, where a lot of these materials were memory hold for a very long time.
Sure. And Bethany, I mean, you could also speak about the Nashville shooting where people had legitimate questions that why, if it's a particular demographic, are these cases, you struggle to determine or ascertain what the motive is. And I know Rob very well. He was a distinguished cop in the NYPD, and he did some great work here. And obviously having the FBI involved now, and obviously a new administration there at the FBI with Kash Patel at the top, the bottom line is they're pushing transparency forward and first. Now, having said that, and I support that, I spent 25 years in the Bureau. I bleed blue and gold. However, you've also got to be careful. Sometimes during the conduct of an investigation, you don't want to give too much out early until you have a really good handle on what you have ahead of you. And in this instance, was this a conspiracy or was this a one-off? And that's law enforcement has come forward and said this appears to be a lone wolf, one disturbed, disaffected, disconnected 22-year-old kid. But you want to make sure before you let too much stuff out and cloud the investigation.
But as an experienced FBI agent here, and you've seen horrific crimes and terror and all of these things that would keep me up at night, certainly, and God bless you for having to be the tip of the spear. We now, I think, can sort of zoom out and hover over the last 10 years in our nation and realize there seems to be a trend here of violence perpetrated by people who, a decade ago we would have said had a mental illness called gender dysphoria and are being immediately prescribed mood-altering hormones and prescription drugs that hormones, by the way, that don't match their biology. And suddenly we see these trends that these mass shootings are perpetrated by people who fit that criteria. And again, God forbid, I would suggest that anyone who is suffering from this or coping with gender dysphoria or challenged gender identity and are under prescription drugs, that doesn't mean everybody is, violent. But there does seem to be a pattern behavior. And when you are dealing with law enforcement, I'm sorry for such a long-winded question, James, but when you're in a supervisory role of law enforcement and you're looking at larger criminal trends and crises in our nation, shouldn't this be examined? Shouldn't this be discussed and evaluated?
Yeah, Larry, in a simple word, absolutely. And it looks like we're breaking the fever if this last election in this last November didn't, dispel the notion that we needed to be afraid about speaking out about the truth. Now, look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychoanalyst. I'm not a psychiatrist. But yes, if you look at this per capita, and that's how we have to look at it in crime trends and criminology, circles. If you look at it that way, it is disturbing, and it is something we need to have a conversation about without being, fearful of the fact that someone's going to jump out and call you a bigot if you say, why is this happening? This is strange and this is new. And I'll wrap it up quickly by saying the mass shooting phenomenon basically started in August of 1966 when Charles Whitman, who was a mentally disturbed Vietnam vet, killed 12 or 13 people in the Texas clock tower shooting. But the trend of mass shootings, it has morphed. And whether we look at radical Islam or we look at this instance lately with trans shooters, we have to look at this and make a determination on what we can do to prevent the next one. And to your point, is it when you're pumping young kids, whose bodies aren't even fully developed yet, whose brains aren't even fully developed yet, we're pumping them full of hormones, cross-gender. Is that something that's triggering, this type of violent reaction that they're upset about, a policy that might be proposed, or they're upset about an opposing ideology? It's worth looking at.
At the very least, thank you. I appreciate the validation of just our basic human instincts and progressive or logical progression. James Gagliano, I appreciate you coming out. I know you're going to be busy today. Thanks for lending your expertise to this.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Again, former FBI Supervisory Special Agent and now the Board of Directors of Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund. It's 7:44.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Bethany Mandel, you're a big Meghan Markle fan, right?
I feel suddenly very sick, and I think I'm going to have to leave, but only during this next segment.
Oh, poor Meghan Markle is so misunderstood.
Oh, God, she is the most obnoxious, tone-deaf person in public life, and that's really saying a lot because we have AOC here.
That is saying a heck of a lot. Well, season 2 of her Netflix special docu-series thing is out. It's called With Love, Meghan, of course, and you'd be forgiven if you thought that they basically took the old Martha Stewart set and took the script of any other Gwyneth Paltrow / tread wife make your own ointment sort of show that we've seen every other year 10 times a month ad nauseum. I mean, it's the same show, and they just stuck Meghan Markle in, right?
My kids learned the phrase hate watch when we watched the first season together.
Yeah.
Because they didn't totally understand what it meant to hate watch something, and then we watched the first season. And my kids are, weirdly enough, like really big fans of cooking shows, and they were screaming at the screen. When she poured boiling water into a casserole container with hard pasta and feta cheese, my kids were screeching at the television. What is she doing?
It's the best way to make pasta.
They cannot wait for this next episode or this next season. But I want to just set the record straight on what exactly this is, because this is not a new season. She made a lot of headlines when it came out that, her PR people said she's been renewed for a second season. That is not what happened. And it wasn't based on the success or failure narrator. It was the failure of the first season. They filmed the entire thing in one go and then split it into 2 parts. So it seemed like she was renewed, but that's not what happened. And her new agreement with Netflix is they get a first look. And so we get to say no first. That's how she was renewed with Netflix.
Everything about this woman is such a fraud.
Yes.
All right. But and again, I just want to reiterate, because I Meredith loves shows like this that are good. I like cooking shows that are good. This is so, but forgive me, it is so formulaic what this show is. The only difference is it happens to be Meghan Markle stuck in the center of the attention, and I guess that might draw some attention. I think more people hate watch it than actually watch
100%.
it for real. All right, so given that, listen to this moment. She sat for a podcast to promote this. And the woman sort of challenges her and says, some people say that you're glorifying homemaking and you're just being another trap. Listen to Meghan Markle's reaction to this. Listen.
From my standpoint, the intention of the show was to share more of myself, to share tips that I love in my life, and to have fun.
But there's this take that you're glorifying homemaking or glorifying trad wives.
Oh, really? That feels odd to me.
Wait, what?
Why is she so upset by the idea that she's glorifying homemaking? What is so offensive about homemaking?
And by the way, Meghan Markle being shocked. I can't believe that you would reach that conclusion. That's all the show is.
And it's, by the way, it's the most asinine version of homemaking, because all she does is sprinkle dried flowers on stuff. Like, that's not making a home. That's just wasting flowers and making food inedible. I'm not interested. That's not a homemaking tip that I'm interested in. You can keep that, Meghan Markle, along with your soggy, disgusting feta cheese pasta.
Amazing. Are you, this begs the question. Are we ready for the Bethany Mandel reality show?
God, can you imagine? I had guests on Shabbat, and one of them just looked at me and said, "This is really chaotic." Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. And that's why you escape every Thursday morning here.
It's true.
So Seth can clean up the mess. It's 7:53.